What if I told you that the tiny memory chip inside your smartphone, the one holding your photos, your messages, your entire digital life, only exists because of a multi-billion-dollar accounting fraud, a failed American nuclear power company, and a high-stakes geopolitical auction that pulled in the governments of Japan, the United States, and China? This is the story of Kioxia, the world's second-largest maker of the NAND flash memory that powers our modern world. But it's also the story of its parent company, Toshiba, and a corporate catastrophe so profound it was forced to sell its crown jewel just to survive. How did one of Japan's most iconic companies fall so far, so fast? How did the ensuing fire sale create a new titan in the semiconductor industry? And why is that new titan's fate now a critical chess piece in the global tech war between the United States and China? For decades, Toshiba was more than just a company. It was a pillar of Japan Inc., a sprawling conglomerate that stood as a testament to the country's post-war industrial might. Its innovations were legendary, but none were more foundational to the modern world than its invention of NAND flash memory in 1987. This was the technology that would eventually make solid-state drives, smartphones, and data centers possible. It was, without exaggeration, Toshiba's crown jewel. From the outside, Toshiba projected an image of stability and virtuous corporate governance. But inside, a different culture festered. It was a world of rigid top-down hierarchy, a place where obedience to superiors was paramount. At the apex of this structure, senior management, including a succession of CEOs, imposed unrealistic profit targets on the company's various business units. These targets were known internally as challenges. They were not suggestions, they were demands, and failure to meet them was not an option. This created a climate of intense pressure, where division presidents and their subordinates were pushed to achieve the impossible, often with the implicit threat that their divisions could be sold or liquidated if they fell short. This management system was not merely a flaw, it was a fraud-generating machine. Investigators later found that quarterly challenges were often handed down near the end of a reporting period, leaving no time for business units to materially improve their performance through legitimate means. When faced with an impossible target and a culture that punished failure, managers discovered there was only one path to success: manipulating the books. The corporate culture didn't just enable fraud, it effectively demanded it as a core function of the job. In 2015, the facade finally cracked. Following a whistleblower report, Japan's Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission began investigating Toshiba's accounting practices. What they uncovered was a systematic, multi-year fraud of staggering proportions. The company had overstated its operating profits by at least $1.2 billion, a figure later revised up to nearly $2 billion. Over a 7-year period stretching back to the 2008 financial crisis. The methods were classic accounting tricks designed to make the company look healthier than it was. Profits from future projects were booked early, while current losses and charges were pushed into future quarters. In its infrastructure business, the company abused the percentage of completion accounting method, essentially claiming revenue for work that hadn't been finished or properly costed. The scandal was devastating. It led to the resignations of 3 successive CEOs, Hisao Tanaka, Norio Sasaki, and Atsutoshi Nishida, who had presided over the company during the fraudulent period. An independent investigation found that dozens of executives were actively involved or complicit. The company was hit with a record 7.37 billion yen fine from Japanese regulators and was sued by shareholders, including the world's largest pension fund. More than the financial penalty, the scandal shattered Toshiba's reputation. A company once seen as a totem of strong and virtuous Japanese corporate governance was exposed as rotten from the inside. Its stock price plunged, investor trust evaporated, and its balance sheet was left deeply wounded. It was the first shockwave in a perfect storm. Just as Toshiba was reeling from its self-inflicted accounting crisis, a second, even more destructive blow was about to land. This one came not from its own offices in Tokyo, but from the United States. In 2006, at the height of a global nuclear renaissance, Toshiba made a colossal bet. It acquired the American nuclear power company Westinghouse Electric for $5.4 billion. At the time, the price was considered astronomical, about 3 times what the seller had projected. Toshiba's ambition was to become a global leader in nuclear plant construction, with plans to build dozens of reactors around the world using Westinghouse's flagship AP1000 design. The gamble was a catastrophe. The AP1000 projects, particularly 2 new plants in the US states of Georgia and South Carolina, were plagued by massive cost overruns, construction delays, and regulatory hurdles. The costs spiraled out of control, creating a black hole of liability for Westinghouse and, by extension, its parent company. By March 2017, the situation was untenable. Westinghouse filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filing forced Toshiba to absorb the losses, leading to a staggering $6.3 billion write-down on its investment. This wasn't an accounting fiction that could be massaged or delayed. It was a real, catastrophic cash bleed that blew a hole in Toshiba's already fragile balance sheet. The timing could not have been worse. The accounting scandal had already wrecked the company's credibility and financial reserves. It had no cushion to absorb the Westinghouse shock. A healthy company might have survived the nuclear hit, but a company already crippled by a massive fraud investigation could not. Facing the very real threat of having negative shareholder equity, which would trigger a mandatory delisting from the Tokyo Stock Exchange and spell the end of the company, Toshiba was backed into a corner. It had only one move left to save itself: sell its most valuable, most profitable, and healthiest asset. It had to sell the crown jewel, its memory chip division. The decision to sell Toshiba Memory Corporation, TMC, in 2017 set the stage for far more than a simple corporate transaction. It became a global event, a high-stakes auction where the prize was not just a profitable business, but a cornerstone of the modern technological world. NAND flash memory was, and is, a critical strategic asset, essential for everything from iPhones and data centers to advanced military hardware. The sale immediately drew in a complex cast of characters, each with their own desperate and often conflicting motivations. First, there was Toshiba itself. The company was in a fight for its life. The Westinghouse bankruptcy had left a multi-billion-dollar crater in its finances. It needed cash, and it needed it fast. The goal was to raise at least $18 billion to plug the hole and avoid the humiliation and financial ruin of being delisted from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Second, the Japanese government was watching with extreme anxiety. The idea of one of the nation's most critical technology assets, the world's number 2 producer of NAND flash, falling into the hands of a foreign rival was a national security nightmare. Officials in Tokyo were particularly concerned about a potential buyer from China, a scenario they were determined to prevent at all costs. Third was Western Digital, the American storage giant. For years, WD had operated in a unique joint venture with Toshiba, co-investing in and sharing the output of the massive memory fabrication plants in Japan. The sale presented a dual-edged sword. It was a golden opportunity to acquire its primary partner and rival, consolidating the market and creating a powerhouse to challenge Samsung. But it was also a grave threat. If another company bought TMC, Western Digital risked being cut off from its own supply chain, a potentially fatal blow. Finally, there were the customers, most notably American tech giants like Apple and Dell. Their entire product ecosystems, from iPhones to laptops, depended on a stable supply of NAND flash. They were terrified of a market consolidation, especially a Western Digital takeover. Such a move would reduce the number of major suppliers and give the new, larger entity immense pricing power over a component that was absolutely essential to their business. They needed to ensure the market remained competitive, What followed was an intense, 8-month bidding war, a whirlwind of negotiations, legal threats, and geopolitical maneuvering. Several groups vied for control. Western Digital, backed by the private equity firm KKR, made a strong push. Another major contender was the Taiwanese electronics manufacturer Foxconn, a key Apple supplier. However, its deep ties to mainland China immediately raised red flags in Tokyo and Washington, making its bid a non-starter from a national security perspective. In the end, the winning bid of $18 billion came from a consortium led by the US private equity firm Bain Capital. But this was no simple buyout. The structure of the deal was a masterpiece of financial and geopolitical engineering meticulously designed to navigate the minefield of competing interests. At its core was Bain Capital, the orchestrator that brought the disparate parties together. To satisfy the anxious American customers, the consortium included a group of US tech giants, Apple, Dell, Seagate, and Kingston. They invested billions not to control the company, but to ensure its independence and the stability of their supply chains. Crucially, their investment granted them no common stock or voting rights, a key concession to appease Japanese regulators wary of foreign control. To neutralize the threat from another rival, South Korea's SK Hynix was also brought into the fold. It invested through convertible bonds, which gave it a financial stake and the potential for future equity, but no immediate control or voting rights. This clever mechanism got a major competitor on board without creating the appearance of a hostile merger. Most importantly, to satisfy the Japanese government, the structure was designed to keep control in Japanese hands. Toshiba itself reinvested over 350 billion yen, about $3.1 billion, back into the company it was selling. They were joined by Japanese optical products manufacturer Hoya Corporation, and government-backed funds like the Innovation Network Corporation of Japan, INCJ, and the Development Bank of Japan, DBJ, were also positioned to have influence. This ensured that, when the dust settled, Japanese entities would hold a majority of the voting stock, over 50.1%, thereby meeting the government's non-negotiable national security requirements. The Bain Consortium didn't win because its bid was the highest or the simplest. It won because it was the only one that could solve an impossible equation. It was a deal engineered for approval, a complex but necessary compromise that gave every major stakeholder just enough of what they needed to sign on the dotted line. Even with this carefully constructed deal in place, there was one final major obstacle: Western Digital. Believing its long-standing joint venture agreements gave it consent rights over any sale, WD launched an aggressive legal campaign to block the deal. It filed for an injunction in US courts and initiated arbitration proceedings with the International Chamber of Commerce, arguing that Toshiba could not sell its share of the joint venture without its approval. This legal battle threatened to derail the entire process, creating uncertainty that caused some potential investors to back away. For months, the fate of the sale hung in the balance. A resolution finally came in December 2017. After intense negotiations, Western Digital agreed to drop all of its legal challenges. In return, it secured what it needed most: a guarantee of its future. The joint venture agreements were not only reaffirmed, but were strengthened and extended out to 2027 and 2029. Western Digital also secured the right to co-invest in future fabrication plants, including the new Fab 6, ensuring its access to next-generation technology would not be cut off. With WD's opposition neutralized, the final barrier was removed. The sale of Toshiba Memory Corporation to the Bain-led consortium officially closed on June 1, 2018, marking the end of a tumultuous chapter and the beginning of a new one. With the sale complete and the company now operating as an independent entity, the final step was to shed the last vestiges of its troubled past. The name Toshiba was inextricably linked to the accounting scandal and the nuclear failure. A clean break was needed. In October 2019, Toshiba Memory Corporation officially rebranded itself as Kioxia. The name was a deliberate symbolic choice. It was a portmanteau combining the Japanese word kyoku, meaning memory, with the Greek word axia, meaning value. The new identity, complete with a silver logo representing the quality of its technology, was meant to signal a new mission: to uplift the world with memory, free from the baggage of its former parent. Freed from Toshiba, Kioxia stepped into the market as a standalone giant. But it did not step out alone. At the very heart of its business model lies one of the most fascinating and unusual relationships in the entire tech industry: its partnership with Western Digital. These two companies are fierce, direct competitors. They battle for market share and major contracts in the global NAND flash market, ranking among the top 5 producers worldwide. Yet, they are completely and utterly dependent on each other for their very existence. This relationship is built on a model of co-opetition, a strategic blend of cooperation and competition. The cooperation happens at the foundational level. Manufacturing. Kioxia and Western Digital jointly invest billions of dollars to build and operate the massive, state-of-the-art memory fabrication plants, or fabs, in Yokkaichi and Kitakami, Japan. They share the immense costs of research and development for new memory technologies and the capital expenditure for cutting-edge manufacturing equipment. This 20-year partnership is the longest and most successful of its kind in the semiconductor industry. The competition begins the moment the silicon wafers come out of the fab. Each company takes its proportional share of the manufactured memory chips. From that point on, they are rivals. They go their separate ways to design and sell their own branded products, SSDs, memory cards, and embedded storage solutions, to the same customers, often bidding against each other for the same contracts from Apple, Dell, or major data center operators. It is a high-wire act, a delicate balance of shared infrastructure and intense, head-to-head rivalry in the open market. This unique model of co-opetition has allowed both Kioxia and Western Digital to remain major players in a hyper-competitive, capital-intensive industry. But it has not been enough to solve their biggest strategic problem: Samsung. The NAND flash market is dominated by a handful of giants, but one stands far above the rest. A look at the market share data paints a stark picture of the competitive landscape. As the data clearly shows, Samsung is the undisputed king of NAND flash, commanding over a third of the entire global market. Its scale gives it enormous advantages in R&D spending, manufacturing efficiency, and pricing power. In this landscape, Kioxia and Western Digital are significant players, but they are locked in a battle for 3rd, 4th, or 5th place, constantly fighting against Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. Individually, they struggle to match Samsung's scale. But here is the number that has driven years of strategic discussions and merger talks. If you combine Kioxia's 13.8% share with Western Digital's 10.5% share, you get a combined market share of 24.3%. While recent data shows a slight dip, other analyses have placed this combined figure at over 30%, creating a new powerhouse that could rival Samsung's 36.9%. This is the fundamental logic behind the merger saga. A combined Kioxia Western Digital would have the scale to truly compete on a level playing field with Samsung. It could pool its R&D resources, streamline its manufacturing, and gain significant leverage in negotiations with major customers. And that is why these two fierce rivals have spent years trying and failing to become one. The strategic logic for a merger between Kioxia and Western Digital is almost undeniable. Creating a true competitor to Samsung would rebalance the entire industry. Yet, the path to consolidation has been littered with obstacles, 2 of which have proven to be formidable deal-breakers. In 2023, after years of on-again, off-again talks, a merger seemed closer than ever. A complex deal was structured that would see Western Digital spin off its flash business, which would then merge with Kioxia to form a new, publicly traded company. Lenders had reportedly committed nearly $14 billion in financing to support the transaction. But at the 11th hour, the deal collapsed. The primary obstacle was a single powerful shareholder, SK Hynix. The South Korean memory giant, which held an indirect stake of up to 15% in Kioxia through its investment in the Bain Consortium, refused to give its approval. Its opposition was not merely a negotiating tactic over valuation. It was a cold, hard strategic calculation. A successful Kioxia-Western Digital merger would create a new industry number 2 with a market share of around 34%. This would instantly demote SK Hynix, with its 22% share, to a distant and less influential number 3 position. SK Hynix had invested in Kioxia in 2018 to gain a foothold and potential influence with a key Japanese player. It had no interest in approving a deal that would not only eliminate that potential, but also create a far more powerful competitor, limiting its own future strategic options. Herein lies the central irony of Kioxia's story. The very structure that was so brilliantly engineered to make the 2017 sale possible, bringing SK Hynix into the consortium to neutralize a rival, became the poison pill that killed the most logical strategic move 5 years later. The solution to the first crisis had planted the seeds of the next. Even if Kioxia and Western Digital could find a way to appease SK Hynix, they would face another, perhaps even more daunting hurdle: the global regulatory gauntlet. Any merger of this scale requires approval from antitrust authorities in key jurisdictions, including the United States, the European Union, and, most critically, China. In the current geopolitical climate, securing approval from China's State Administration for Market Regulation, SAMR, is a monumental challenge. The escalating tech war has seen the United States impose sweeping restrictions on China's access to advanced semiconductor technology. In response, China has begun to weaponize its own regulatory processes, using lengthy antitrust reviews as a tool of geopolitical leverage. A merger between a major Japanese technology company and a leading American one, creating a stronger, non-Chinese memory champion, is a prime target for Chinese obstruction. The deal directly aligns with the US strategy of strengthening its technological alliances to counter China. For Beijing, delaying or blocking the merger is one of the few levers it can pull to retaliate and disrupt the strategic plans of its primary adversary. This is not just speculation. It is a well-established pattern. China's regulators have a history of stalling or effectively killing major tech deals involving American companies, such as Qualcomm's attempted acquisition of NXP Semiconductors. The Kioxia-Western Digital merger is caught in this geopolitical trap. The business logic driving it is sound, born from the realities of market competition. But it is being judged not in a boardroom but in the brutal arena of superpower rivalry. So we come full circle. Kioxia was born from a corporate implosion at Toshiba, a crisis rooted in a toxic culture and a disastrous bet on nuclear power. It was sold to a consortium masterfully engineered to navigate a geopolitical minefield. And now, its most logical path to survival and long-term competitiveness, a full merger with its partner rival Western Digital, is being blocked by the very forces that shaped its creation: the complex web of its own shareholders, and the escalating tech war between global superpowers. As of mid-2025, the saga continues. The pressure to consolidate remains immense, driven by the cyclical and capital-intensive nature of the memory market. Merger talks are reportedly back on the table. Kioxia is said to be attempting to placate SK Hynix with offers of production collaboration, hoping to win its approval by offering a tangible benefit. Meanwhile, Western Digital is proceeding with plans to formally separate its hard drive and flash memory businesses, a move that would create a cleaner structure for a potential merger. The Japanese government, viewing the partnership as a symbol of Japan-US semiconductor cooperation, continues to offer support. including billions of yen in subsidies for the joint venture's fabs. The outcome of this long and winding story will do more than decide the fate of two companies. It will serve as a bellwether for the future of the entire global technology industry. In an increasingly fractured world, can market logic overcome geopolitical friction? Or are we entering a new era where the map of global technology is drawn not in boardrooms based on competitive strategy, but in the halls of government based on national security? The future of the memory in your pocket and the entire digital world it connects to may very well depend on the answer.